Well, would you look at that? I'm making a video on the environment again. Now, I do often make videos and I talk about my climate anxiety and all of those sorts of issues and blah. But you know, like, this has actually been a very significant year for the environment and the future of the planet. So we've had two significant things happen in 2021. One, the IPCC report that came out a couple of months ago that just made me personally spiral as it confirmed the doom that we are facing. And two, COP26 has just ended, which has had a mixed response. So honestly, two pretty huge things, which in my opinion should have really been happening like over 30 years ago as they found out about all of this stuff, you know, but hey, cover-ups are fun. So as far as I'm concerned, I personally have been struggling mentally with all of this stuff, so I really wanted to make this video to be like a bit of a TLDR around what's kind of been happening, but then also ways to empower yourself, like with 8 simple things that you can do in your life, especially when you're feeling hopeless, like we all often do these days. I know I do. So I don't want people to feel helpless after seeing all of this coverage and all of the doomsdayness of it all, because there is still a slim chance of us being able to like get to that 1.5 degrees centigrade. Hey, we can try. I'd rather try and fail than never try at all. I know that that's not the Yoda quote, but whatever, it doesn't matter. So anyway, let's get right on into it. First off, of course, subscribe, and don't forget to check me on Instagram as well, because I'm active in my community tab on here. It helps me out heaps by you subscribing and commenting as well. And also on my Instagram stories, like, I get a lot of feedback for you around the videos that I create, so if you can subscribe on both, that would be great. And the Instagram link is in my description box down below, along with everything I've used on my face, because we're creating this kind of oceanic look, which I hadn't really planned out, but I did blue nails, so I was like, that was all I could think of. Yes, everything is cruelty-free, vegan, not owned by parent companies that test on animals. And let's just jump straight on into the fun? Can I call it fun? Yes. Let's get into it. So it's all been quite political, hasn't it? Now, I don't actually want to go attacking the people who I genuinely think really do want to make change. This has always been quite a challenging journey, trying to get people to change and go against what the lobbyists want and do all of the things that are better for the planet but not for profit. So, you know, like, this is an ongoing issue. If we could just have business completely out of politics, then that would be the most ideal thing, but I've already talked about that in this video up here. In case you're interested, why it's very important that we pay attention who businesses are actually voting for and trying to get their way in politics. This is all obviously very damaging, and it's also very challenging given the fact that it's mostly been around developed countries that are actually causing all of the issues, and then you've got other countries like, for example, India and China, who have been trying to play catch up in this whole capitalistic game of life, which we're all, except for that one island that doesn't allow people to get to it, which I fully understand. We're all part of this game, right? Whether we want to be or not. So capitalistic world, baby, you have to sometimes work jobs that you don't agree with, which is a video I'm going to be making in January as well. We're going to be talking about that. Now, do I think more should have been done with zero wiggle room? Oh yes, big time. But like I said, I also recognize the power disparity and the fact that we've got lesser developed countries like being expected to like pull up with such a ridiculous amount of demands being made of them when like they're trying to struggle with their own infrastructure and catch up with the Western world, whatever. I'm incredibly frustrated at the lack of willingness to help from developed countries. Am I also incredibly mad at how many delegates the fossil fuel industry actually had here? Hugely. I can't even begin to express just how mad it made me. So obviously this is very TLDR, do not let this be your only touch point with COP26, whatever you do, and I've got a whole bunch of resources for everything in the description box, so do go check those out as well. So there are 3 key takeaways which sound great as sound bites. Revisiting emissions cutting plans next year to try to keep the 1.5 degrees centigrade target reachable, the first ever inclusion of a commitment to limit coal use, and increase financial help for developing countries. Sounds kind of okay, right? As like a tiny soundbite. We can pretty much sum everything up with this tiny little paragraph from The Guardian. The pledges on emissions cuts made at the 2-week COP26 summit in Glasgow fell well short of those required to limit temperatures to 1.5 degrees, according to scientific advice. Better luck next year? That's basically the gist of this. 2 weeks of trying to negotiate, 2 weeks of people trying to put the science first, but then businesses getting involved in the fact that we can't have political parties without businesses intervening, apparently. This has been an emotionally challenging week. And also just given the fact that we're on a track for a 2.4 degree rise in global temperature by just sticking to the goals. The goals that were put in place here, we're on track for 2.4 degrees, which is utterly devastating. The only good takeaway is the fact that they're agreeing to meet next year. As far as I'm concerned, that's really it. So it gives people another year to put even more pressure on the leaders. You know what else happens during that time? Elections. You know what people love during like election season? Lobbyists. I do honestly hope that things get much stricter going forward, but I also believe that all of the discussions that were had now should have been had and agreed to over 30 years ago. But honestly, like, the doom of the world is just really a problem for millennials, Gen Z and alphas, right? It's not really a boomer issue. It's not very much of a Gen X issue. Currently as it stands, which is one of my biggest gripes, is the fact that poorer countries are not going to be getting like financial help for loss and damage from the climate crisis. Loss and damage, which refers to the destruction caused by extreme weather, which is now hitting vulnerable countries far harder and more frequently than had been predicted. I mean, hey, I know that my predictions can be accurate and like I can tell a lot about people very quickly. Can we just like not lose our humanity? That would be wonderful. I would be so here for it. This is what I've been saying for years, and I've talked about it in my other videos as well. But I'm also very aware that people in actually affected developing countries will have been saying this far more than me. And hey, I'm just a privileged white girl who lives in an island that people think looks like Lord of the Rings. We can all pretty much agree that this was not enough. Like, I don't think that anyone left happy. The lobbyists, or the politicians, or the people living in peril. Don't think anyone's happy with the outcome here. I know that I'm making this way too bleak, but I'm really trying to like keep my rage to a minimum. Like, here are some responses from my Instagram stories when I asked the question what people want leaders to do. Someone wants the leaders to yeet themselves off the planet. I can fully understand why you'd say that. So yes, of course, rather than letting you feel completely helpless, I honestly had to just vent my frustrations then. We're just going to talk about 8 very easy, approachable things that you can do so that you don't feel completely at a loss to like the devastation that's going to be happening more and more around the world, okay? Because I know that I definitely need this too. Now, I do fully understand that it's fully systemic issues, the people at the top that are at fault, blah blah blah. I'm not saying that the individual holds all the responsibility. What I'm saying is, like, if you're feeling helpless, these are things that you can actually do to work within the system to actually make a bit of a difference. So that's where I'm coming from here. I'm not having a lecture on personal accountability and telling everyone that they need to change and like have nothing anymore. Like, that's not what I'm saying here, okay? So what can you do? 8 fairly simple things. Number 1 is vote. Honestly, plain and simple, this is the one thing that can lead to the biggest impact, really. Being in touch with political issues within your own country is one of the most powerful things that you can actually do. I know that it's vanilla, the most boring, dull thing ever, but this is really, really impactful. It's really, really good to know who is funding whom and the reasons and the actual policies behind it. Like, there are accounts that I follow that really do break down like what the policies stand for across the different parties, because we don't really have that many parties. Even in New Zealand, our MMP system is like kind of flawed, honestly. And same as like when it comes to politicians who are happy to take money from lobbyists who are trying to get their own agenda across to keep things exactly the same and not have to change to abide by new rules which will take away their business. I'm also not on about just like the big elections either. I know that people can get really fixated on them, but it's actually those smaller ones and being aware of like what's happening around there that you can really, really make a huge difference, because that affects the way that your town or city or region actually runs. And you know, like if you're in America, I believe that that is like contributing towards like who runs the house, doesn't it? So it's really good to be focused on your own country, especially if you're feeling really, really helpless. It's important to know what's happening globally, but yeah, if you focus in on your own country, your own circle of influence that you can actually have, that is just a way to like easily cope with it if you really are struggling mentally. Because yeah, we do actually have to play the dullest game in order to be able to try and get like a bit of change in the right direction, as in for the environment and for people in the world, and not just business. Businesses don't matter when people can't breathe, okay? That's That's all I'll say. Number 2, join a union. This may sound a bit like, what? But at the same time, joining a union, if you're able to, has massive impacts, like seriously. This is not only for pay equity, working hours, and health and safety issues. No, this is actually like far broader than just people saying that they're wanting more money. It's like, that's just what the news wants to tell you. That's what it's about, because unions kind of don't help businesses all that much. It helps the people, which is why I'm telling you to join them, because unions can have impacts on company policy, discrimination, which is going to be an even bigger issue, especially with climate refugees, and wanting to make sure that everyone can be taken care of. And it also ensures that you get to raise the issues to the company about issues that you want them to actually face into. Like, for example, their waste outputs, their outputs in general, the environmental impact of the business. All sorts of things like can be influenced by the union because it's built by the people. So I'm personally on a sustainability committee at work as well, because I am that person. It's a grassroots movement where we're trying to impact the way that the business functions to make it function in a much more green way, measure outputs, measure waste, do all of that like real tangible stuff, and have an impact on the way that people travel, the way that like everything kind of happens at work, and try to minimize our footprint. And we're also trying to change people's behavior and educate them as well around waste and all of those sorts of issues too. Your influence at work can actually be incredibly powerful when you work together, which is why I'm just raising this as a point, because you'll be quite surprised at the leaders that are willing to listen to you, because I was taken aback by leaders actually being like, oh yeah, actually no, that's a really good point. And by working together, you have far more power than just raising these issues alone, or by just moaning to each other, because that doesn't really do anything other than lower morale, when you can actually channel that energy to something better. It's honestly been quite nice to have people endorse you, even on very prickly topics. Number 3, if you have a bank, like most of us do, switch banks to a better provider. Now, this may seem like, oh my goodness, that's so hard to do, but you can actually switch banks. I know that it's harder when you've got like a mortgage and stuff, but there's different ways that you can actually impact it, because there are a wide number of banks that are benefiting directly from the fossil fuel industry. So you can take your business from them and go somewhere else that doesn't. Like I said, I live in Aotearoa, so when it comes to like me having all of the knowledge about all the banks around the world, this is definitely something that will take like maybe a little bit of research on your part, but you can easily find information on like who is funding what. Now the same goes for your power company, much simpler than what you might want to think. Now in Aotearoa, New Zealand, in case you don't know, around about 80% of our electricity is generated through renewable resources. So it's mostly hydro and geothermal energy that we're harnessing for like most of the electricity that we use. So you're fairly okay, but you can still switch providers and it's relatively easy to do so. Around the world this will be a very different issue, and of course this depends on accessibility and all that other stuff, but it's one other thing to be aware of that is a relatively easy thing where you just have to make one switch and then you can forget about it basically. Number 5, use what you have. Repair, buy secondhand, recycle, all that good stuff. And then of course like you're recycling and then throwing away as your last resort, because there never really is an away. An away is just a pit of plastic waste in the ocean. I want you to just think about that anytime you chuck something in the bin. Now I have indeed talked about this many times in the past, but if you have items in your wardrobe that you're no longer using, if there's things around your house that really do not have value to you, they're taking up space, you're just like, there's no point of me having this anymore, why not just list it on Trade Me or Depop or whatever other thing you have like Facebook Marketplace? There's no point of having something in your house that you're not using, it doesn't bring you joy, or is like aspirational pants or whatever you're owning to like try and make yourself think that you're gonna fit something again when you haven't for many years. It's like, well, why? Someone else can actually use it. So what I tend to do once a quarter is go through all of my stuff and be like, do I actually need this? And I list a whole bunch of stuff on Trade Me, or I go to a charity shop. Now obviously like I'm not saying that charity shops are perfect, like for example I only go to hospice ones, and same as like the waste from charity shops, thrift shops, whatever you want to call them, that could be a huge issue as well, like there's gentrification of all of that. But as far as I'm concerned, I'd rather people be encouraged and happy to wear secondhand, use secondhand instead, than, you know, like buying fast fashion, which is incredibly polluting to the whole planet. The real thing here is that nothing is perfect, but it doesn't mean that we can't actually do better and try and work in better ways within the system, which we have to. Number 6, learn about what can actually be recycled in your town or city and follow those rules. So wish cycling actually is one of the biggest problems around the recycling systems, because people are throwing things into recycling that are contaminated or that are not suitable or cannot be picked up by the machines. And so when you've got contamination, you are raising huge problems because all of that stuff that it's been contaminated by just goes straight to landfill. So you know, like greasy pizza boxes, plastics that can't be recycled, dirty plastics, whatever. Like, you do have to clean out your items before you throw them in the recycling, by the way, in case you didn't know that. That causes contamination, which kind of undoes all of the good work. So I really, really want to encourage you to do that. It's relatively simple, and most councils actually have this stuff in easy form for you to be able to understand. So general rule is clean it out, check to see if it's got those symbols, check to see if those symbols actually align with what your council allows, and there you go. Bada bing, bada boom, boom, boom. You are helping. Number 7, eat a more plant-based diet. Recognize I didn't say go vegan because I'm not trying to pressure you into that. I'm just saying, like, the impacts of animal agriculture on the environment are huge, massively unsustainable, and something that we should absolutely be running away from. So if you are watching this video, for example, you're probably in a little bit more of a privileged position where you actually can incorporate more plant-based recipes into your life. I'm not saying that you have to do a complete 180 flip like what we did. It's really important, and it can actually make a huge difference by just switching over. Like, even you can find your own cultural cuisine veganized. Seriously, there have been so many people translating recipes over to be vegan instead, so that's something that I really do recommend. Have a little look around. I will have some of my favorites down below. Now look, of course, I'm not trying to tell everyone to quote unquote be perfect, because no one is perfect. What I'm saying is, like, there are always things that we can do to change and have a better impact on the environment and the world and people around us. It's more about being mindful about what you buy and making sure that you're using it. Like, for example, if you do a low waste swap because you're like having this whole eco-emergency and then you don't end up using it, then that's literally creating a waste of energy and resources. If you view everything as being a finite resource that you are taking, then it really does plant this in your brain a lot more that oh yeah, everything is finite here. And number 8, talk to people. Now, I know this may scare introverts, I fully get it, but having conversations, sharing resources, and generally, like, wanting to open up the floodgates to having these discussions is so impactful. Like, you'll be surprised at your circle of influence and what change you can inspire in people. Wow, you really can tell I'm an ENFJ, can't you? Because the thing is that community is the thing that's actually going to get us through this, and apathy actually doesn't help anyone. Same as you just feeling hopeless, alone. I fully get those feelings, but doing something about it makes you feel way better. Now, I'm not saying that you have to go storm the streets or whatever, like, especially if you're not comfortable with it, especially if it's not safe. I'm fully not one of those people. That's why I'm suggesting things to work in the own confines of the system that we all have to, like, obey. And it just kind of helps create, like, this feeling of, like, okay, I can't change all of this, but I can change this. And if everyone aims at changing this, then collectively it has a huge impact. And also, when you actually realize that there are so many other people fighting this same fight as you, it helps you feel a lot less alone about it as well, because you can often easily feel like you're fighting up against, like, this behemoth, and it's like, actually there's so many others doing this too. So most of what I've suggested is actually really easy, and that's exactly why I've made this video, because I definitely know feelings of hopelessness have been encroaching on my mind a lot. I never want people to feel as bad as what I have felt in my life. So when you're feeling really bleak and overwhelmed, as I often do, remind yourself of the things that you can do, refer back to this if it helps, or just remember all of the things that you have been doing to try and make a difference, because hopefully that will help give you back some inner strength again. Oh, and one other thing is food waste. So I've probably mentioned many times in my stories that I do meal prepping once a week, so that way it's like I already know all of the things that we kind of need for the week. Maybe I'll throw away like a broccoli stem or a few old carrots, but then that's really it. I don't really throw away food, and food waste accounts for so much waste around the world. Granted, of course, like, it comes down to the global systems in place around food, transportation, all that other stuff. I'm sure that there are many scientists working on trying to solve this issue as well. But there's also the thing of, like, all of us can kind of have like a little bit more of a positive impact on this as well. Hopefully this video has allowed you also to feel like the rage rage that I felt, and also give you some productive things that you can do so that you're not just falling into this pit of despair that is so easy to fall into. I fully get it, and if you need help, please do reach out to people that can help you. Now look, I always say that therapy should be free and accessible to people, but I don't really see that happening anytime soon. I really do hope that by doing these small things, potentially talking to more people about like the way that you're feeling and like things that you can all do together, actually finding those communities around you locally, I hope that that can give you a bit more inner strength as well. Now of course, I never want these to just be like a one-sided thing. If you have other things you can also suggest, please do put them down in the comments down below. I will have my own pinned comment that I will go and update with things as people add good ideas to, because I think that that's really important. Maybe I'll even do a post on Instagram about it once this has been up for a couple of weeks, so then there's a bit more of an infographic about other things that people can do too. But yeah, I really want this to be a place of hope as opposed to hopelessness. Also, don't forget to be nice to each other. Like, we're trying to create a nicer world in a place that can be incredibly mean. So yes, I would love to see some more kindness, more ideas, like more things that can help empower us as opposed to make us feel disempowered by the crushing weight of the system around us. Thank you, lovelies, so much for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, please leave the globe emoji with the view that works best for you. I know the view that I pick most often is a view that most of you don't see, because it's like the view of Australia and Aotearoa, because hey, they miss us off maps a lot still. It's great. But anyway, do take care of yourselves. Hope you enjoyed this, and I'll see you later. Bye!